We discuss a massive 40-plus person federal RICO indictment against Boston's feared Heath Street organization based out of the Mildred C Haley Apartments, aka the Bromley Heath Projects. The conspiracy, which began in Boston, spread from Maine to Rhode Island and was investigated by over 20 law enforcement agencies. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware of this, but there was big news in the bean last week. A giant multi-agency sweep of one of Boston's most notorious crews. It resulted in a massive 40-plus person sweeping RICO indictment. The authorities are alleging that Heath Street was behind a multi-state narcotics trafficking ring, multiple fraudulent unemployment and COVID relief insurance claims, large coordinated unarmed mass robberies of department stores, multiple acts of violence against their rivals in which innocents were caught in between. Over 60 weapons were confiscated during the raids and arrests. Also, the authorities are emphasizing that the Heath Street used juveniles in varying illegal acts, from as simple as serving as lookouts to joining in the mass robberies and committing acts of violence. Acting U.S. Attorney from the District of Massachusetts, Joshua Levy, goes as far as to accuse senior Heath members of rewarding these youngsters with appearances in the group's rap videos. So it seems pretty apparent to me that the government is trying to tie in the rap music and the artist videos into the criminal conspiracy. It's definitely something that people need to pay attention to. They started doing it in the UK where they actually admit lyrics to songs as evidence at trial. They're trying to do it with the Young Thug YSL case in Atlanta. And if they do, prosecutors are going to start doing this all over the United States. U.S. Attorney Levy goes on to quote lyrics from the song in the press conference. He says, quote, "I can say the names, but the feds might come for us." Then the prosecutor goes on to add, well, the feds did come for you. Then when you look at the actual indictment, who do you think would be at the very top of the list? I wasn't at all surprised myself. Jacory Lyons, better known as Truddy Y Jizzle. Of course they want the press with one of Boston's best known rappers at the top of the indictment. He's literally being charged with RICO conspiracy though. Everyone else has a narcotics charge or a weapons charge or a violence charge, something to do with fraud or robbery, but Y Jizzle simply has a RICO conspiracy charge. It's a little suspect in my opinion, but with his record, and I think he does have some pending charges, they'll probably use this as leverage to lean on him. This is an obvious attempt to mess with Y Jizzle and harm his career. The authorities clearly take offense to the audacity of a lot of this drill music, and they're trying to send a clear message. They know that the young kids in the Mildred C Haley Apartments and really all over Boston idolize Jizzle. So when they're graphically talking about real crimes and people that are dead because of street rivalries, the authorities are seeming to take this quite personal. Honestly, I really don't understand the mentality of bragging about crimes on social media or in music. These guys are basically building the government's cases for them sometimes. It's like they're chronicling all their crimes on record for the authorities. I guess the internet clout is just too important these days. Apparently one of the defendants indicted posted a picture on social media of a bunch of weapons and wrote, "I bought all these with my COVID relief money." And I really don't know. You're asking for a prison cell when you're doing stuff like that, in my opinion. I'm just saying. The authorities have been watching and monitoring the group's social media and music videos for years now, apparently. The Mildred C Haley Apartments, aka the Bromley Heath Projects, as they used to be known, are one of the Boston area's biggest and most notorious public housing projects. Located in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood, aka JP, aka Jurassic Park, Heath Street began to identify with the Miami Heat gear back in the 1980s, and they took on the moniker The Heat as the crew's name. The Heat have been one of the most violent and dominant factions in the city for decades. They're surrounded by enemies and have feuded with their bitter rivals in an ongoing retaliatory cycle of violence. Right across Jackson Square on the other side of Columbus Ave, you have the dreaded Academy Homes and the organizations that go by the moniker the Braves, and they wear Atlanta Braves gear. They've beefed with the Heath Street for years. Then just north of the Heath Street Projects is Mission Hill, another bitter rival who are very much still at odds with. The majority of the disrespectful drill music coming out of Heath Street is directed at the guys from Mission Hill, who usually identify with Michigan Wolverines gear. Now you guys know King Bricks is somewhere just rubbing his hands together like, yeah, Jizzle, hold that. I'm just kidding. I'm playing. I'm fans of them both. Just playing. Another Boston crew that the indictment brings up in which violence was committed against is H Block. They're another bitter rival of Heath Street. H Block is named after a cluster of streets in the Grove Hall neighborhood where the majority of the streets begin with the letter H. It's right north of the Franklin Park Zoo, which I bring my kids to all the time. It's an awesome zoo. H Block is a small but dangerous crew which is always in the headlines, especially in the 2005-2010 time period. Somewhat ironic, but Trotty White Jizzle's father was actually from H Block. He was tragically killed years earlier. It's not uncommon in Boston's complex web of alliances and rivalries to have family members from opposition blocks. Now, I'm not at all surprised by this big federal RICO indictment or the fact that they're going so hard after the rappers and their music. Honestly, it would be kind of shocking if they just ignored it all. It would just reinforce what a lot of residents of the Mildred C Haley Apartments and other neighborhoods like it feel deep down, that the authorities and leaders just don't care about them. U.S. Attorney Joshua Levy stressed that in the press conference that they do care. While violent crime is down across the board in Boston, it doesn't feel that way in places like the Heath Street Apartments. This sweep is the authorities' way of trying to note that they recognize this and they're trying to do something to fix the problem. I talk about this a lot on my channel about how Boston has become one of the biggest safe cities in America, but in projects like the Mildred C Haley Apartments or in certain streets in Boston, it's a very different story. It really might seem like if you lived in said areas, the people in charge simply don't care as much about you as people who live in the more affluent areas. The authorities were putting an emphasis on the fact that they haven't forgotten about communities like the Bromley Heath Projects. They said in the weeks following the raids, the authorities would be down in the projects talking and working with the youngsters that were negatively affected by everything that has transpired. They want to offer the juvenile services and programs to get them out of the street lifestyle. If nothing else, maybe at least some positive people can build a rapport or possibly a relationship with some of these kids. An older resident of Heath Street said to a news reporter that it's nothing for these kids to do. No after school programs, nothing. So the main problem here is there's nothing positive being offered these kids, and it's not hard to see why they're being enticed by these older kids who they obviously see as cool. I mean, at least give them another option. I talk about this all the time. What are the situations that lead up to kids thinking joining a street organization is a good choice? We'll see. Time will obviously tell. Are they just saying this stuff because it sounds good and they're running for some sort of office, or do they actually mean it? Boston is more than wealthy enough to be able to come up with some sort of programs and services for these kids. And there's plenty of individual rich philanthropists that could dig in their pockets as well. Like I said, we'll see. But if they start investing in these kids at an earlier age, maybe they wouldn't have to be conducting these sweeps like this and handing down these massive RICO indictments. Wah, 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 right? Although some of the stuff like why Jizzle's charges are a little suspect being charged with just RICO conspiracy, the actual RICO indictment is huge. There's like almost 20 different law enforcement agencies involved in this investigation. The narcotics trafficking end is quite elaborate. They're alleging that Heath Street members were trafficking numerous substances down South Shore and all over New England. The Maine DEA arrested 4 different people in the state as co-conspirators. They were trafficking counterfeit Pressies and raw fetty, among other things. A person was also arrested in Enfield, Connecticut, which is like right over the border from Springfield. And there was also a guy arrested in Central Falls, Rhode Island. So that's what I'm saying. It was all over New England. Other Bay State cities where people were arrested were Brockton, Randolph, Lynn, and Arlington. The United States Attorney's Office of the District of Massachusetts led the investigation, and they were aided by, okay guys, you ready for this? The ATF, Homeland Security, the Department of Labor, the Office of the Inspector General, the IRS, the U.S. Marshals, the U.S. Secret Service, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, what? The Mass State Police, the Maine DEA, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, the Boston Housing Authority Police, the Quincy PD, the Randolph PD, the Lincoln PD, and of course, the good old BPD. So I guess it's fair to say it was a pretty coordinated law enforcement effort. There's also multiple bodies included in this indictment. They occurred over years as a result of these rivalries, along with other acts of violence. They kept repeating a story about a 9-year-old girl that was unfortunately severely injured in an attack against their Mission Hill rivals. Of course, the 9-year-old girl was not the target, but the authorities were trying to illustrate how dangerous these rivalries were to the innocent people living in the affected neighborhoods. Also, the authorities wanted to call to the public's attention the dangerous weaponry these crews possessed, and that they found them in possession of young adolescents. Some of the weapons found had equipment on them that made them more dangerous than the normal models. They turned semis into fully autos stores, if you know what I'm talking about. They talk about it in rap songs all the time. The financial crimes and fraud schemes in the indictment were pretty bad as well. The government alleges that almost $1 million, $900,000, was collected in fake unemployment and COVID relief funds. One person is said to have filed claims in 11 different states, plus the U.S. territory of Guam. There was also 23 separate fraudulent employment claims made against a fictitious company called Married to the Mob that was connected to the Heath Street organization. The U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, Joshua Levy, was really trying to turn the public's opinion on Heath Street organization, painting them in an extremely negative light, calling them despicable for stealing COVID relief funds that were supposed to be for people struggling during the pandemic. Also, the last part of the indictment alleges that they were organizing mass unarmed robberies of department stores like Nordstrom, Sunglass Hut, and Victoria's Secrets, among others. I'm sure everyone has seen clips of mobs of teenagers and young adults descending on a store and grabbing everything they can see before running off. Now, some people might think no one's being hurt, it's big corporations they're stealing from, and to a certain degree, I kind of agree. But if I was in one of those stores with my daughters and a mob of masked people came running in and grabbing everything they could see when people were screaming, you can bet it would be scary to my kids or anyone else that's not used to seeing something like that. And the corporations don't just eat the losses, they pass it on to the consumer with these ridiculous inflated prices, so it's not completely victimless. I'd say it's definitely a big loud message that the authorities are sending. They're listening to the music, they're monitoring people's social media, and they're simply not going to accept people bragging about crimes on these platforms anymore. They're going to use this as evidence and prosecute these people to the fullest extent of the law. This is a big indictment with almost 20 law enforcement services involved in the investigation. The fact that they're putting Wide Jizzle at the very top of the indictment at the #1 co-conspirator is a clear message. The authorities are saying there's no line between art and reality. The music and the criminality are one and the same. Trotty Gang and Heat are the same thing in the law's eyes. Again, and similar to how in Atlanta they're treating YSL as a criminal organization and not a record label, I'm not sure what they actually have on Jizzle. He's simply being charged with RICO conspiracy, no actual alleged crimes. It's more symbolic than anything else in my eyes. The authorities obviously see him as the face of the organization. He's definitely the most well-known member to the public at large, that's a fact. I literally just made a video about this like 2 weeks ago where I was saying why Jizzle has so much talent, but he's so deep in the streets and so caught up in the mess that he'll most likely never break out and reach his full potential. And that's a shame, man. The message that I've heard him express in interviews about how he regrets getting involved in this life and wishes if nothing else for his children that they don't follow in his footsteps. That's greatly overshadowed by the negativity in his music, and it's the exact opposite message that he's sending in that interview. Now will be reinforced by the government's narrative that everything they were rapping about was real. The authorities allege that Wide Jizzle and the rest of the Heath Street members terrorized the Bromley Heath Projects and its residents, manipulated minors into committing crimes, and made various other Boston neighborhoods the targets of their aggression. Like I said, they're painting these guys in an all-around bad light. I mean, it's no secret. I'm a Wide Jizzle fan and some of the other guys that were caught up in this indictment, but I don't know, man. Like I say at the end of every video, make good choices, make good decisions. These guys had choices. Don't get it twisted. Guys like Wide Jizzle, they got options at this point. But now they gotta live with the consequences of those choices. Literally, like the whole lineup for the drill banger Fax is in the indictment. They burn a Portland Trailblazers hat in the beginning of that video. Orchard Park uses the Trailblazers gear to represent. They used to be allies of Heath Street back in the day, but apparently not anymore. Just add them to the list. Kiko was in the indictment. Trotty Mula was in the indictment. Then really the one that broke my heart was Mozzie. Ricky Maserati got hemmed up in the RICO as well. Why? Why'd it have to be Mozzie? You know, that just bummed me out. I feel like he's a talented rapper. He has some stuff going on legitimately. He could have risen above that negativity. We'll see. We don't really know what's going on. We'll have to wait and see as the case proceeds and what the nearly 20 law enforcement agencies have uncovered during their investigation for evidence besides just social media posts and music lyrics. U.S. Attorney Joshua Levy looks like he means business, though. And guys, you need to realize the government is just too big and too strong. They're going to catch you if you're breaking the law. It's basically almost impossible to sustainably get away with crime for an extended period of time anymore. Just work, guys. I know it sucks. It does suck having to work for a living, but it's so much better than jail. Just if you don't know that for a fact and have no experience, just take my word for it. So it's big news in the Bean. It's a big case. I just wanted to put together a quick video kind of outlining this RICO indictment and discussing how now it's happening in Boston as well. Just like New York and Atlanta, they're going after the drill rappers and the street organizations connected to them. The younger generations really are, to a certain extent, along with society, being negatively affected by some of the toxic elements of drill. Now, I can't lie, I love to listen to drill, especially when I'm clamming. It pumps me up when I need that extra push. Some days I want to listen to drill, some days I want to listen to the Grateful Dead. It's all about the mindset. But even as a fan of the music, you can't deny the culture of disrespecting the dead and basking in the violence against your rivals is negative and detrimental to your mental health. I'm sure plenty of other people in the city are paying close attention to this case. Who knows whether or not this is the first of a series of RICOs against other organizations, or it's just a warning shot from the authorities putting everyone on notice. Either way, I really hope they follow through with giving the youth of the Mildred C Haley Apartments some support and better options for a brighter future. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, but most of all, guys, like I said previously, make good choices, make good decisions, take good care of yourselves, your family, your friends, your fellow human beings. Try to have a good day. I'll talk to you soon. God bless.